Okay, we are in the making our way through the eighth chapter of Masechah Shabbos. We have been discussing the various laws pertaining to the malacha of chutzah, which is the 39th of the 39 malachos, carrying from one domain to another domain. And the Mishnah continues with discussing the various objects one would carry. What would be the minimum size that one would have to carry in order to be liable? The basic principle that we have been discussing is that in order for you to be liable on Shabbos for carrying, you'd have to carry something significant. If you are carrying something that's insignificant, so then that would not be the Torah prohibition of carrying on Shabbos. So, we discussed different food items. We discussed animal food, food for human consumption, and different objects. And that's where the Mishnah picks up now. Hamotzi chevel kedei la'asos ozen l'kupa. Someone carries a rope in order so that they could put a handle on a basket. That size rope is a very insignificant, it's a very small size, but it's significant enough to do something with. And that's going to be the principle going through. Gemi kedei la'asos talai lenafa l'kvara. You have a reed in order so that you could make a hanger for a sifter. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kedei litol mimenu midas minal lakatan. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's an even smaller amount, that they didn't have, I don't know what those things are called, when you go to a shoe store and you need to measure the kid's foot. So they put their foot on the foot measure. So back then they didn't have those fancy foot measurers that they have at the shoe stores today. They used a rope. So they would measure rope against the child's foot, however big the rope was. They'd cut it to size, and that would be used to know how large the shoe needed to be. So that for a small little child, whatever the smallest, shoe size was, that size rope would be enough to be liable. Nayar kedei lachtov alav kesher muchzin. Paper in order so that one could write a tax receipt on it. Really a toll, it was a tax receipt, a tax that was made for, the toll roads. So when someone would cross over a river, the Bartanura explains, so there was a certain tax that one would have to pay, like similar to we have on our highways, toll collectors. And you get a little receipt. So that's a small little tiny receipt you would get. So that size paper would be enough for it to be considered significant for you to be liable if you carried that size paper out into the public domain on Shabbos. V'hamotzi kesher muchzin, and if someone were to carry a kesher muchzin, which is the receipt itself, you would be liable. Now, obviously, if you're going to carry the paper, that would fit the receipt. So then certainly if you were to carry a larger receipt, you would be liable. So what's the Mishnah doing? Adding in Bahamoti Kesher Muchzin, which is the receipt itself. So the Bartanura explains, because, not always was the receipt written on a piece of paper. Sometimes it was written on something that was less significant than paper, and therefore you would be liable for carrying out a larger receipt that was of less quality. You would be liable if it actually was the receipt itself. Nayar machuk, let's say it was paper that was written on once and then it was erased. So then the paper becomes smaller quality, a lesser quality, and therefore it would need to be a larger size for you to be liable. Kedei lichroch al pi tzlochis, it would have to be something that would be like a bottle cap size. Kedana shell palyaton. That size is what would be liable, just enough that would cover like perfume. Okay, good. Moving on to Mishnah number 3. You see I'm in a rush because I want to get to something that's delicious in Mishnah 3. Check it out. Or kedei la'asos kameya. Someone carries, let's say, a hide from an animal that's like a piece of leather. Kedei la'asos kameya, enough to make an amulet. Which was something that, especially back in the times of the Mishnayos, the Gemara discusses the significance of it. A kamea was used for healing purposes. It was something that either had it was a small leather pouch that would have either writing written on a scroll that had specific types of Kabbalah for healing purposes, or it would be something that sometimes it would be herbs that would be kept inside. I actually have a kamea. My great grandfather Haham Amos Adiv wrote a kamea. He was a Kabbalist, and he wrote a kamea. I actually have it. I have it with me. My grandmother gave it to me. Kalaf kedei lichtov alav parsha ketana shebetfilin. If the minimum size in order to be liable, if you carried parchment, would be enough to write the smallest parsha, the smallest parchment that goes inside of tefillin. Now, what's that? So now we have two tefillin. We have our tefillin shel yad, and we have our tefillin shel rosh. Our tefillin shel rosh has 4 compartments for 4 parshios that go inside of the tefillin. Probably the most famous of those parshios is the parsha of Shema and V'ahavta. Okay, those are 5 psukim in Devarim. Shema V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. That paragraph is one of the 4 parshios of Shema that are in the tefillin of Shel Rosh. In the tefillin Shel Yad, it's all on one piece, all on one parchment, all on one cloth. So therefore, the Bar Tanura says we're talking about the tefillin Shel Rosh over here. So that the smallest one that only fits 5 psukim, that size cloth is enough that it would be considered significant. If you were to carry it on Shabbos, you would be liable. Shehi Shema Yisrael, that's Shema Yisrael. Dio, what about ink? Kedei lichtov shtei osios, enough to write 2 letters. Now, why 2 letters? So 2 letters, as opposed to 1 letter, is considered significant. Now, generally, when I write something, I rarely will write only 2 letters. Even when I am writing notes. So when I write, shorthand, so I'll write usually no less than 2 letters at a time, or really 3 letters at a time. 2 letters, though, comes from something else. 2 letters comes from construction. Then when they were constructing the Mishkan, so they needed to know, because the Mishkan again was a traveling Mishkan, and therefore they were constructing it and deconstructing it, putting it up, taking it down. So how'd they know which board went next to what? So they would write 2 letters, Aleph and Bet, and that's how I knew this board went next to this board, right? And then Gimel went next to Dalet, and Dalet went next to Hey, right? They knew how things clicked into each other because they wrote those 2 letters on it. Just 1 letter is not enough. 2 letters is significant. Kechol, what about makeup? Kedei lachol ayin achas, in order to put makeup on only one eye. Now, is enough makeup to only color 1 eye significant? I think that if people were to walk around with makeup on only 1 eye, I think that'd look a little silly. So what is this referring to over here? So the Bar Tanura, as he always does, fills in the blanks for us. And he says that there were certain very, very pious women that would cover themselves so much to the point that the only thing that was showing on them was only 1 eye. That was it. They only needed 1 eye. They didn't need to show any other part of their body. And that's how that is the source of the fact that you can have just enough eyeshadow for 1 eye to be considered significant. But what I want to focus on, and now we can take a breather and slow down a little bit. What I want to focus on is Dio kedei lichtov shtei osios, enough ink to write 2 letters. Now, how are you carrying out this ink? How are you doing it? Obviously, the ink is in some sort of a vessel, correct? Meaning, either it's on the kulmus, it's on the feather itself that you used to write with, it's on the quill, right? And on the quill, if it's large enough, it can contain a certain amount of ink that can write 2 letters. Or we're talking about it's in a vessel, it's in some sort of container. So then if that's the case, why wouldn't you be liable for carrying the feather? You didn't put ink in your hand and just carry out ink in your palm and like cup ink and carry it out like that. It would potentially ruin the ink. It would ruin your hand. So it must be that it's in some sort of a vessel. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use it. It's either on the feather, it's on the quill, it's in a cup, it's in something. So then if that's the case, you should be liable for carrying, we'll use the quill as the example. You should be liable for carrying the quill. Why is the Mishnah saying then that for ink, you're not going to be liable? Oh, so you will tell me that, okay, I'm liable for the feather, but I'm not liable for the ink. And the Mishnah was talking about the ink, right? That's what you would tell me. Except Rashi says our assumption was correct, that you're not liable for the feather. Listen to this Rashi. Rashi is on Pei Amud Aleph in Masechah Shabbos. Rashi writes the following. Os achas b'dio, os achas b'kolmos. So Rashi says that the case we're talking about is a case where the ink is inside of a kulmos, it's inside the feather. That's the way the Gemara makes the case. V'i amers typically mishum kulmos. Rashi says, now one could assume you'll be liable for carrying the quill. Lo mechayev aleha. Rashi says, you're not going to be liable for carrying the quill. Mishum, because shehu tafel lepachos mikashir. Because the quill is insignificant in relation to the ink. Why are you even holding the quill in the first place? Because you really need the ink. Really, if you were to ask a sofer, what is their most important tool or item that they use, they would say, of course, the ink. Without the ink, there can't be a Sefer Torah. They would say probably the parchment and the ink. But the feather is really there to get the ink on the paper. If there was another way to get the ink on the paper, you would use another way to get the ink on the paper. It doesn't need to be a quill. So the quill is really insignificant in relation to the ink. That's what Rashi says. And then he points to a Gemara. Let's say someone were to carry less than the minimum size of food. So we said that the minimum size of food is about the size of a dried fig. Let's say someone carried half a dried fig's worth of food into the Rosh Hashanah inside of a bag. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says later that you're pater, af ala kli, even for the bag itself. Because the whole purpose of the bag is to carry the food. And since the food is insignificant to make you liable for carrying on Shabbos, therefore, I'm not even going to be liable for the vessel itself that it was carried inside of. Is everybody following this? So Rashi is telling us that I'm not liable for carrying the feather because I'm not liable for carrying the ink. Even though the feather is something that is significant, but since it's only there to service the ink, therefore I'm not going to be liable. This is what Rashi says. The problem is that Rav Elyashiv points out that this Rashi is against another Rashi. Rav Elyashiv points out that Rashi over there on that Mishnah, on Daf Tzadi Gimel, says that not any kli that is used to carry in that case was the food that was less than the minimum size. So it's a tiny, tiny, small amount of food. So remember the Mishnah said that I'm not going to be liable for carrying the vessel because I wasn't liable for carrying the food. But Rashi says over there on that Mishnah that it really depends on the vessel that the food was carried in. Listen to what Rashi says. He says, "Im hakli tzarich lo l'shimash acher." Let's say this is a reusable vessel. It has more than one purpose, meaning I could carry it for the small little half a fig, and then I could reuse the bag to carry apples and pears and jelly beans, and I could use the bag for many things. I could use it to carry my keys. the bag has has many functions to it. It's multi-purpose. So therefore, Rashi says, so then why would you be putter? Why would you get off the hook for carrying the bag? Of course you would be liable for carrying the bag in that kind of a scenario. The only time where you won't be liable for carrying the bag is if the bag's only purpose is for carrying this small little half a fig. So for example, let's say you took the half a fig and you wrapped it in saran wrap. So you can't reuse the saran wrap. You wrapped it in tin foil. You can't really reuse the tin foil. So in that scenario, you are not going to be liable for the tin foil, even though the tin foil may be something insignificant standing on its own. But since its only purpose is for carrying this half a fig, so then therefore I can't be liable for the tin foil. However, if I put it inside of a Tupperware container, a small little half a fig inside of a Tupperware container, that Tupperware has many uses. I could carry that, I could reuse that Tupperware easily for many different things. And therefore Rashi says, I'll be liable in that scenario. So asks Rav Elyashiv, so then that goes against what he's saying over here in our case on Daf Pei. Again, Rashi in our case says you're not going to be liable for carrying the quill. Why? Because the quill is insignificant because its only purpose, because its purpose is to serve the ink. But isn't the quill something that could be used for, writing more and writing more Sifrei Torah, writing more tefillin, writing more mezuzahs, writing more letters? The quill is something that will be reused. And therefore, Rav Elyashiv asks, you should be liable for carrying the feather. And Rashi contradicts himself. This is the major question that Rav Elyashiv asks. Rav Elyashiv gives the following answer. And this is cited in a sefer that was written by Rav Elyashiv's Talmidim. It's called Ha'aros. It's just notes from the shir that Rav Elyashiv would give in his Beis Medrash, Tiferes Bachram. Rav Elyashiv passed away in July of 2012. He was the Posek Ador. He was the greatest Talmudic scholar, probably of our generation, definitely of my generation. Rav Elyashiv, already in his 50s, already, was already considered to be the Gadol Hador. He's only in his 50s. He was already considered to be the Gadol Hador. In fact, his Mechutin, the Stipler, there's a letter that was written in 1959. 1959. So this was, Rav Elyashiv he passed away at the age of 102 in 2012. That means he was born in 1910. And this is in 1959. So Rav Elyashiv is 49 years old, okay? And the Stipler, who's his Mechutin, wrote the following letter to Rav Elyashiv. That Rav Elyashiv sent the Stipler a question that was posed to him, and he wanted to get the Stipler's opinion on it. So the Stipler writes back his opinion, and then he says, but I really am quite confused why you're even asking me, because everyone knows at this point that you're the Gadol Hador, and everything you says, the halacha follows you. He was 49 years old. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I had the schus of meeting Rav Elyashiv many times. It's my brother and I took every opportunity we could whenever we're in Eretz Yisrael to go and get a bracha from Rav Elyashiv. Even after he passed away, we still go and daven in his Beis Medrash. Through doing that, we have a relationship with Rav Elyashiv's closest student, Rav Ben Sion Cook, who's up and coming, one of the Gedolei Hador now. And Rav Elyashiv was unbelievable. Rav Ben Sion Cook told me something amazing. This sefer, Ha'aros, which are, again, the notes from all the classes he gave at Beis Medrash Tiferes Bachram in Meir Sharim. So that was Rav Elyashiv's Beis Medrash. And Rav Ben Sion Cook told me, and he has volumes of the Talmidim, the students put out volumes of his notes, spanning about 3/4 of Shas. And when Rabbi Elyashiv gave shir on a Masechta, he didn't only focus on like 10 or 15 blot of the Masechta. He gave shir starting from the beginning. He'd go all the way to the end. When they finished that one, they'd go on to another one. So about 3/4 of Shas, they have shiurim from 50, 60 years worth of shiurim that Rabbi Elyashiv gave. So Rabbi Sion Cook told me something unbelievable, that when Rabbi Elyashiv first started giving shir in Tiferes Bachrim, so he said that the students were whatever, not like, he said that they're regular balabatim, people that would come to the working man's kollel, that would go and hear shir from Rabbi Elyashiv. I'm sorry I'm sorry I disappoint. That Rabbi Elyashiv would be teaching whatever, a regular balabas, not people that are learning full time in yeshiva, not kollel nix. He wouldn't teach Rosh Yeshiva. He would teach regular folks, regular Jews. This is what he did. This is what Rabbi Elyashiv did for 60 years, and then eventually, the top students in Yerushalayim would come and hear Torah from him, but it was never busting at the seams. It was never like the Rosh Yeshiva would come and listen to Rabbi Elyashiv. It was always a relatively small crowd. I was once, a couple times, I went to his shir, while he was still giving, and there were maybe 30 people in attendance. Sometimes I was there were 15 people in attendance, sometimes 40 people. It's a relatively small crowd. And but Rabbi Sion Cook told me, he said that, Rabbi Elyashiv was famous for his hasmada, the fact that he was able to concentrate in learning for so long. He learned for 18 hours a day, every single day, for, practically from the time he was about, 18, 19 years old, learned for 20 hours a day. So essentially for 80 years, Rabbi Elyashiv learned 18 hours a day. He would stop when people would come to ask him questions, or if, he was, attending a bris milah, but other than that, learn all the time, 18 hours a day. So Rabbi Sion Cook told me, he said during those 18 hours, you know what he was learning? All he would do for 18 hours was prepare the class he was going to give. Now, Rabbi Elyashiv could have spent 20 minutes preparing and still given a class that would blow anyone who was in attendance out of the water. 18 hours a day to prepare a shir for people that did not have great background in all of Shas and Poskim. 18 hours a day he spent preparing that class. The commitment is unbelievable. And that's how this is what Rabbi Sion Cook told me. He said that's how you become the Gadol Ador. So Rabbi Elyashiv gives the following answer. He says, says Rabbi Elyashiv, when Rashi said that you're going to be liable for carrying the vessel if it's something that is reusable, like a Tupperware, for example, Rashi was talking about a scenario where the vessel itself has multi-purposes, meaning it's not that the Tupperware is only used for figs and you could reuse it for more figs, but rather the Tupperware could be used for figs, for apples, for oranges, for containing your keys, containing your bills. It could be, there's many different uses that a Tupperware could be used for. However, if it's something that really only has one purpose, even if it can be used multiple times, but it only has one purpose, there, in reality, it really is tafel. It really is insignificant with regards to whatever it's being used for. So in our case, the feather, the quill, it can be used for one thing, as a writing utensil. And in our scenario, the writing utensil is used for the amount of ink that is insignificant. It's only enough to write one letter. And therefore, I'm not even going to be liable for carrying the quill itself. Now, you might be wondering, well, okay, this is all fine and dandy, and I understand the difference between why you'll be liable for the Tupperware, but you wouldn't be liable for the quill. But at the end of the day, you carried a quill into Rosh Hashanah. You carried something significant. I don't care that it is considered insignificant to the ink. At the end of the day, did you do something that isolated in and of itself? Let's say there was no ink at the bottom of the quill. I would be liable. I carried something significant into Rosh Hashanah, and therefore I should be liable. So why am I not liable over here? Forget about the ink. This is not kashrus where, a small drop of milk that falls into a big vat of cholent is going to be batel. It's going to be null and void because it doesn't give off a certain amount of taste. Here we're talking about Shabbos. I did a malacha. Did I do the action of carrying? Yes, I did the action of carrying. So why am I not liable for the feather? So this is based on the concept of malacha she'ena tzricha lagufa. That we've described many times how the malachos of Shabbos were formed. They were formed patterned after the Mishkan, that just as the Mishkan was built as an artisan and it was a thoughtful type of a work, so therefore, when I do malachos on Shabbos, it needs to be done in that thoughtful, thought-out type of a way. I need to know what I'm doing, and I need to do it for the direct purpose that I'm trying to accomplish. Therefore, if I do the malacha, but rather I do it for a different purpose, says Reb Shimon, I'm going to be pater. Why? Because that's not called malachas machshavas. If I carry the quill in order so that the quill could get to Rosh Hashanah, so then I'm going to be liable. But if I'm carrying the quill only so that the ink could get to Rosh Hashanah, and the ink is something that's insignificant, so I'm not even going to be liable for the quill. Why? Because that's called the malacha she'ena tzricha lagufa. It's not called malachas machshavas. Malachas machshavas means I did the malacha for its purpose, not for another purpose. That's what Reb Shimon says. Rabbi Yehuda argues. Rabbi Yehuda says that you will be chayev. You're going to be chayev for violating Shabbos. Who cares what your intention? At the end of the day, did you do the malacha? Yes, I did the malacha. Another example that's often used, that the Gemara uses, let's say someone digs a hole. Not because they want a hole, but rather because they need the dirt. So is there anything wrong from a biblical standpoint of having dirt in your possession on Shabbos, of attaining dirt? Okay, it might be muksa, which is a rabbinic issue. But from a biblical standpoint, is there anything wrong with having the dirt? No. What's wrong? Making a hole. Oh, but I only made the hole in order so I can get the dirt. Reb Shimon would say that you're pater. Reb Yehuda says, no, you're chayev. Because at the end of the day, you made a hole. You did choresh. You did plowing. You made a hole. Don't tell me, oh, no, it's a lame excuse, says Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Shimon says, no. On Shabbos, malachas machshavas, we take to the nth degree. Everything you do needs to be calculated. If you do it for another purpose, then that is not called the malacha of Shabbos. That's not called doing malacha on Shabbos. That's not called violating Shabbos. Is it rabbinically prohibited? Yes. But are you going to be chayav a karban? Absolutely not. The problem is that the Rambam contradicts himself, how we paskin. Generally speaking, what's brought down in Shulchan Aruch is that we paskin like Rabbi Shimon. We paskin, and most Mishnayos go like Rabbi Shimon, like our Mishnah, that if you do the malacha for a side purpose, so then you are not going to be liable. That's called the malacha she'en tzrich legufa, and we're pater according to Reb Shimon. We paskin like Reb Shimon. That's the way that Tosfos paskins, Rashi paskins, all the Rishonim, the Ran, everybody, and the Rif, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch paskins accordingly that you would be pater. However, the Rambam seems to paskin in Parak Aleph Halacha Zayin of Hilchos Shabbos. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, that if you do a malacha she'en tzrich legufa, in fact you are liable, you're chayev. The problem is that there's another Gemara. There's a Gemara on Daf Gimel. The Gemara talks about, let's say someone sees a snake on Shabbos. They're concerned, it might damage me in some way, so I want to capture it, right? So if we're concerned that you are that you're going to if we're concerned that you're going to be damaged in some way, if it's life threatening, so of course you can capture it, okay? But let's say you want to capture it just so that, well, you know what? Let's use a different example. Let's use the example that the Rambam uses is Mapis Morsa. Okay, Mapis Morsa is I pop a pimple on Shabbos. Okay, so popping a pimple on Shabbos is prohibited if I want to try and let airflow go through that spot. I want to try and create the airspace where the pimple is. That's what the Gemara says. But if I'm just trying to extract the pus from the pimple, Jamin, great to see you. If I'm just trying to extract the pus from the pimple, so then I'm not gonna. That would be a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. That's what the Gemara says, and I would be pater. The Rambam seems to paskin like that. The Rambam paskins that mapis morsa kedei in order so that you could just take out the lecha, in order so that you could just take out the pus, you're not going to be liable on Shabbos. But I thought he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda that I did the malacha and I did it for a side purpose. But at the end of the day, I did the malacha. Don't tell me the side purpose. That's a lame excuse, and therefore I should be liable. So how does the Rambam get out of it? So this is discussed by many of the different achronim. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik has a piece on this, and really all the achronim try to deal with this on the Rambam. My Rebbe, Rav Hershel Schechter, though, likes to say that one could answer the Rambam by pointing to a Ran at the end of the 14th chapter of Shabbos. The Ran over there says that the concept of malacha she'ena tzricha legufa does not apply to toldos. Does not apply to, remember we said that there are principal malachos and subcategories of malachos. And with regards to subcategories of malachos, says the Ran, there's no such thing as malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. Meaning, malacha she'ena tzricha legufa, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, would be perfectly permissible if it's done on a tolda. If it's done on a tolda. Why? So the Ran explains, because a tolda by definition is doing a malacha not for its purpose. So now you're taking it 2 steps removed, therefore you're not going to be liable. Mapis morsa is a tolda. And therefore that's why the Rambam paskins like Reb Shimon in the case of Mapis morsa, of trying to extract the pus from the pimple. However, generally speaking, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, but regardless, this piece from Rabbi Yashiv of how to explain Rashi about the carrying of the ink is something that is really fundamental and is something that is going to be very helpful when we get to the 10th chapter. God willing, when we get to the 10th chapter, Perek HaMatzniah, we're going to see just how fundamental this piece from Rashi is. Next
Eva,
time,
your phone is ringing.
I want to start the next time I want to start the 9th chapter. So if everyone can, next Monday when you get together to learn, try and finish the 8th chapter together if you didn't already. And then we're going to start the 9th chapter on Wednesday, God willing. Okay, good. We'll stop here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, guys.